Hi.
Okay, don't tell me it's going to be just the two of us in here.
I don't think so. I hear somebody else.
Yeah.
Although, what a win. Like, if you we could have made it really intimate.
Yeah, we would have a lot to talk about, Alex.
There you go. Right?
Seriously.
Well,
I have your book and I'm working on a PhD on this topic. So,
really? Okay, we need
yeah.
to connect afterwards. I'm super curious about this. I have had one person included in their uh PhD thesis, which is cool. Yeah. Thesis, is that
Yeah.
what it is? Or dissertation?
Di yeah, a dissertation, but I'm doing it at a British school, so they do refer to it as a thesis.
Oh, okay.
So,
That makes
or
sense.
a critical commentary because I'm writing a novel and then there's a critical commentary and the novel is the demonstration of the techniques that I'm talking about. So
Oh, fascinating. That's so cool.
yeah.
Well, I love that you're doing that. Yay, more. Let's get more stuff out there about it. I'm all for this.
Well, I was excited to see your book.
Thank you. How'd you come across it?
Oh goodness. Trying to think, was it referenced by someone?
Mm. I know
Because
I've been
it's
on one
it
British
just
podcast.
it's new,
Yeah, it's a
right?
year old now.
It's very yeah. As you can imagine, I'm constantly looking for material, so I found it somewhere. It came across my
Right. Just like
my desk.
probably in just researching. Yeah,
Exactly,
that's out there. Yeah,
exactly. I
that
have
makes sense.
lists and lists of sources. So, but yeah.
That makes sense. Very cool. So you're in the UK?
No, I'm in Michigan.
Oh, okay, but you're working.
My PhD, I'm doing the low-res PhD at Bath Spa University.
Oh, pretty cool. I like
It's
that.
the PhD in creative writing.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's what I like about it is that it's a true PhD in creative
Mhm.
writing. So it's not like in the US. It's a PhD really about literature and creative writing as a as
Side thing.
but yeah.
Yeah. We have I'm in Dallas, so University of North Texas has a PhD in creative writing, but yeah, I think it's set up in the way
Yeah.
that you're describing.
Yeah. So
Well, we'll give some people a little time. It's 7:30, but
yeah.
yeah, some more minutes. I had 60 signups, so it's a good number. Yeah.
Sometimes people sign up to get the recording.
Agreed. Yeah, that's true. Somebody did submit at least one question beforehand, so we have one question to start, and if not, then we can make it as intimate and we get a two-person access and we can chat about this topic and then any others too. I'm definitely all open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Well, one of the things I was going to ask you is if we could have a conversation, an interview that I can use in the thing. Maybe we'll end up doing it this evening.
There we
Just,
go.
just talking.
Absolutely.
Um,
People usually show up five. Somebody actually signed in like half an hour ago. Um, and that person, it's neither one of you. So I'm guessing that person will end up showing up, but we'll see.
sorry, maybe they have the time wrong. I'm
Yeah.
about to say goodbye to my son. Just a sec.
Go ahead.
Okay. And I'm getting the book so I can reference.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, I
I
have
have
mine
it in
here
front of
too.
me. Okay.
We'll start at 7:35.
Where in Texas are you?
I'm in Dallas,
In
like a
Dallas.
little bit in the South Dallas area. Yeah.
Another thing, we can talk about at another point.
Uh-huh.
I run an MFA program, a low res MFA at Alma College here in
Nice.
Alma, Michigan. So it would be really cool to have you come to a residency.
I'd love that. That'd be amazing. I've
Yeah.
had friends who've done low residencies, and it just sounds really nice and lovely to have like that experience. And they're like, it feels like you're at camp for those because you do it like twice a year, and they're like, you
Yes.
go and like you get really close and have a
Yes.
great time. So
It's intense, yes.
that's cool.
But I think but they especially like the one-on-one work
Mhm.
afterwards because you spend the semester working with a faculty advisor and submitting them work. So
Oh, I'd love
that
to discuss that. Yeah, I mean, the idea and goal was always to get this in creative writing programs and literary programs in colleges and such too. So it's exciting to hear people who work in academia are learning about the book. So yeah. Okay, well, it's 7:35. We have a small intimate group. It is recording, so I'll be able to share with other people. And because we're a small intimate group, people can ask questions in the chat. You can unmute yourself. I did get one question beforehand. It was submitted anonymously. So I'll probably answer that one first. But just to start, thank you everybody for being here. We did have 60 signups, and I know some people might not be able to attend, so they might be seeing this recorded after the fact. And thank you all for checking this out. We're here to talk about the process of writing an identity, not your own. This book came out in 2024, I think August last year, actually. Um, and since then, I've been discussing it with different writing programs, individual writers, going to events and book festivals, talking about it. Today, I just found out it won an award. The International Latino Book Awards gave it's one of the finalists in the Best Arts Books, and I'll find out in October if it's gold, silver, or bronze place, which is pretty cool. So I just love this. And I've also created a course. So if you a course specifically for speculative fiction writers because the book does talk a little bit about genre, but it doesn't necessarily go as deep into different types of genre and how this topic relates to those genres as much as I wanted. So that's why I created the course on my website, alextemblador.com/courses. And I feel like at the end, I was just going to give people a sneak peek preview at the course if they're interested in seeing what it looks like from behind the screen, because usually you can't see what the course looks like until you buy it. But I just want to show people what you could kind of offer or what I offer in that. But for now, let's get into questions. I will just read what the question was and then kind of answer. And from there, anybody, the three of you that are here, are able to ask any questions that you would like. Thought I heard something. Any questions that you like, and we can talk about this process and all its facets. Um, yeah. Okay. So the question was, I understand not wanting to be deliberately hurtful, but are there exceptions in the case of satire, which is designed to offend? Usually its targets are the powerful, not the powerless, but should all groups be immune? So this is a good question. I actually get similar questions to this. Not necessarily always about satire, but sometimes people go, I want to use stereotypes within my book for a purpose. I want to like play up on the stereotypes in terms of like some theme or some messaging or some aspect of the plot. Can I do that? So I feel like those two questions are kind of aligned. And within my book, I do say like I love fiction, really any kind of writing that does question and discuss uncomfortable topics about power dynamics in the world, right? I myself do that with magical realism. That is like the literary genre that I came out with. That is part of the literary genre of magical realism to question and interrogate aspects of power dynamics in terms of identities in the world. So yes, I do think that you can. Oh, we got another person. Okay. Okay. Welcome, welcome, Andrew. I'm just answering our first question that I had, and I'll just repeat it. Somebody asked, I understand not wanting to be deliberately hurtful, but are there exceptions in the case of satire, which is designed to offend? Usually it's targets the powerful, not the powerless. Should all groups be immune? Um, and so, yes, I do think that you can use things like satire or stereotypes to interrogate, question, mock, highlight different aspects of identities that are in power, that have privilege. I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as you are in control of that narrative, that you are very mindful of it, and how you're doing it, and that your reader absolutely 100% understands that it is either satire or that you as the author are being very deliberate in using a stereotype to show that you do not agree with that stereotype, that you do not agree with that problematic depiction. So it has to be so well done that your reader understands, oh, this is like a deliberate tool that the writer is doing, which can be difficult. Even within the book, there are sections like chapter 11, I have broken down all the different identities based on race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, nationality, disabilities, etc. And I do include white as like one of the races, but I even mention in the book, I'm not going to go into all the stereotypes or tropes about white people because they have privilege and power and they're already out there. And so stereotypes do not necessarily like harm privileged communities. Um, so yeah, I do think there's ways to talk about different identities, use stereotypes in satire with care, but it has to be done with the utmost of care. It can be very difficult to do. Probably takes a lot of edits and practice. There's no reason why you can't practice that at home. But it has to be it has to be done with control. So I don't know who asked that question. It was shared anonymously, but I hope I answered that fully. And now, because we have a small group here and maybe more people will join us over the hour, if anybody wants to raise a hand, ask a question, either in the chat or verbally, I'm welcome to any questions. And I'm sorry it won't be anonymous, but
It-
yes.
I will ask a question. So I would like to hear you speak a little bit about the writer's own self-examination.
Mm,
So part of the thing, one of the things I'm looking at is that, yes, you want to have sensitivity readers, you want to read the work of other communities, but I find that when mistakes happen, it
mhm.
comes from the writer having a perception that they did not realize they had.
Yeah.
So I feel um, that a certain amount of self-interrogation, even as you're working on the book,
Mhm.
is important. So I'm not sure if you went into that in a way that was just different from the way I'm wording it, but I wanted to hear you talk about the role of the inner um, questioner.
Writer. Yeah, yeah. I think as writers, right, when we're building worlds, we're building characters and we're building stories, half the time maybe the character feels like us and like we're building them based off us. But usually we have such a wide range of cast of characters that we start pulling from family, friends, from people we meet on the sidewalk, from things we see on TV. And we think because we have a close connection or we've seen so much like certain types of representation on TV, um, or we've been around these type of people because they're related to us or at our school or whatever it may be, that we understand them and we don't even in our minds think about it. We're just like, oh, I know how that person is because I've met somebody like that.
Hmm.
And that I think is where we get in the problem, like get into an issue as writers, is that and within the book, I talk about unconscious bias, that we all have it. It's this thing that is put into us by society, by our school, by our teachers, our parents. And even when we recognize, oh, I do have a bias toward that community of people, and I did realize it, and I don't like that I had that bias, and it makes me uncomfortable to feel that way, I'm gonna not believe that anymore. But when you're writing and you're in the zone and you get inside this like kind of spiritual moment of writing, you're not thinking about that at the forefront of your mind. You're thinking about like the story and the next thing a person's going to say in the dialogue and how do I describe that person? And you're going with the flow and those biases come out
Hmm.
no matter, sometimes no matter how much inner work you've done, how much awareness that you have. I mean, even for myself, I will come back, read something and go, oh, I thought I was saying it this way in my head, but when it came out in my hands, that's not how it came out when I typed it. Um, and I didn't mean to do that. And why is that coming up? Is that something that I'm not even aware that I believe or have or think or assume about other people and communities? So I don't think this process is possible without self-reflection as an author, without self-reflection of who I am and my perception of the world and how the world perceives me, because all of those things are going to go into the book or the story or the poem that I'm writing. And I want to have control over the things I'm writing rather than letting the story have control over me.
Hmm.
It's nice to kind of feel like it's coming from you and it's flowing out of you. And you can allow that to happen if that is your process. But that's why I put so much emphasis on editing, because at the least I want you to catch it on the back ends, your unconscious biases, these like things that you don't realize have been so ingrained in your mind, that even when you try to work through them, they kind of come out.
Hmm.
Um, and I find that a lot of writers get very uncomfortable when, especially probably in the editing process during the critiquing aspect, when somebody goes, hey, that thing feels off or a little sexist or a little racist or discriminatory or problematic or whatever term they use. Um, and people go, no, I'm not like that. I would never do that. And then they don't want to see what's there. And that's totally fair and understandable. But at least in the book, I give people advice on how to talk to people this way, how to like discuss critiques, and also encourages them to like, okay, when you get feedback, sit with it, let it sit there for 5 days, come back to it 5 days later, and then maybe you're going to be more receptive. But you have to accept the fact that you are not perfect as a person, as a writer, that biases are always coming at you for the rest of your life. This is something you're always going to have to deal with as a writer. And if I'm interrogating the world as a writer, then I should be able to interrogate myself as well. So I hope that answers some of it.
Yes. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. All right. Could you say something about how or whether to present dialect? Yeah, great question. There is a whole chapter on dialogue in my book. And essentially, so dialogue in itself, we know, and dialect, let me get the definition, because there's a difference between dialect and accent that we actually mess up half the time. And I myself had to look up and go, what's the difference between dialect and accent? 93. Um, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna just read from this because I can remember a lot of things, but I can't always remember definitions. Um, doo, 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 doo. Okay, an accent is how we pronounce words. So my mom says wash instead of wash. That's an accent. A dialect involves accent, grammar, and words that are common to a specific area. So, um, a new, trying to think of an example of that. An accent, Texas, we might say y'all, that would be a word. But we would do it y'all, like stretching the ah. And then grammar, we would use a lot of double negatives when speaking. So all of those combined would be a dialect. You can so when it comes to dialect and it comes to accent and it comes to dialogue specifically, we have to be very mindful because there's been research that shows that we actually do put a lot of stereotypes in dialogue. So for instance, Latinas and mixed characters in film were given a lot of sexualized language, and Black characters were given a lot of cuss words, and women characters were given words based on like motherhood, family, life. Men were given words based on like strength and jobs and like courage, aspects like that. And then older characters were given dialogue that was focused on religion and family, weirdly, religion and family. So we do know that like stereotypes show up in our dialect and dialogue and accents. Um, so what I suggest is know what those stereotypes are for the identity in which you're writing. And that this includes race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity. There are all these stereotypes, right, related to those specific aspects of someone's identity. And question and look at the words that you're using for those characters. Are you only giving them certain language that is more sexualized than over other characters, or giving certain characters cuss words over others? You can describe dialect and accents. I always suggest kind of doing it lightly, only because it can start to feel a little bit caricature-y for certain characters. And if you only focus on dialect and accents for certain identities and not for others, it's going to be very noticeable to your readers. And they're going to go, well, why does this character only have accents? And are you saying something about their identity because they're the only ones that you are describing as accents? And even within the chapter, I remind us we all have accents. Like we don't think about it, but we all have accents no matter where we're at in the world. And so if you're going to highlight one, like highlight them all within the story. I definitely do not suggest um is it phonetics? Is that the word I'm trying to say? Yeah, writing phonetically, usually because publishing doesn't really like people to write phonetically anymore. Again, it can result in a lot of caricature. You can do it, but if you're going to do it, I suggest doing it for all your characters. Publishing doesn't like it because usually readers have a harder time reading it, so they just kind of suggest you not doing it. But I've seen it done very, very well in certain instances. So that's not to say you can't figure out ways to do it, but be very mindful of when you do it. I always suggest be direct with accents as well. So rather than trying to like describe the accent through their dialogue, I will just say he had a Southern Texas accent. He had a South London accent. Like it's kind of just easier to be direct. Like it would be the same thing with race. I've seen people try to like describe skin color, skin tones, and all these other aspects instead of just sometimes saying the race, which would just be halfway easier and also not give you like not allow you to put in stereotypes that don't need to be there. You can also describe how a character's voice sounds. So like you do things like nasally, melodic, throaty, twangy, but be mindful of those as well. And then describing accents and dialogue in the exposition. So not in the dialogue, but around it, before they start speaking, after they speak, etc. So I hope that that's helpful. Do we have any other questions? Hi, Cherry. I'm an undergrad student studying creative writing at Emory. Congratulations. To what extent is it okay to write marginalized identities not of my own to raise awareness for that group? What is your advice on avoiding misrepresentation? Okay, good question. Um, Most writers, I would say like 99% of writers, are likely going to write at least a character with at least one different identity than them that is historically marginalized. And the best example I can give of that is that if you're not a woman and you have written a woman character, women are historically marginalized identities, and a lot of writers do not think about that aspect and are not very mindful about it, which is why we see a lot of awful stereotypes and in different genres like sci-fi and fantasy on women characters, and in other genres as well. So I say we've been writing marginalized identities. We haven't been doing it well. Usually we're writing more than one different marginalized identity because people inhabit so many different identities, right? And whether that's your secondary or tertiary character, they likely probably have a different identity than your main character, which might have the same identities as you. You could also write a main character with a historically marginalized identity, but that one is probably a little bit harder than writing secondary, tertiary. All of them are difficult and need to be taken, like written with the utmost care. But definitely the main character, because you would be close with them throughout the whole book. Um, I am a little bit, you asked, is it okay to write marginalized identities? And with that, I would say you're already probably doing it. It's probably helpful to learn how to do it. Just whether or not you write the main character or not, we're still doing it. But the part of your question where it says to raise awareness for that group, um, that is where you have to be a little bit careful because a lot of people will come into writing identities with an agenda, with going, I hate seeing discrimination, I hate seeing oppression. I want to as part of my advocacy or activism to like share other stories, to uplift issues going on in that community. And I absolutely understand that. I've had that experience. I get that. But yeah, and Sophronia mentioned this. This is what the author of American Dirt said. This is where it can get you in trouble because you are coming in really hot and heavy and excited. But what ends up happening is that you stereotypes and bias and all these other things pop up because you're so excited in terms of the activism and like the advocacy and you start doing this thing called saviorism where you're trying to like save another identity and community that doesn't need your saving. So I do not think it's good to go into writing other identities, especially marginalized identities, with the idea that you want to raise awareness for them because they can do that themselves. But if you want to explore stories that feature different identities, that's a whole different aspect. Um, and I think you can do that. And it takes a lot of practice and a lot of commitment to make sure you get it right and a lot of investment in those communities more so than you raising awareness. And what is your advice on avoiding misrepresentation? I mean, there's so much advice. Probably the easiest thing to start out with is you need to learn about other identities. Read nonfiction written by people of those identities, read fiction written by people of those identities, listen to their podcasts, learn about the history, the culture, the laws that affect people of that identity, how it plays a role in the US, but also in other countries if those identities exist. Usually they do exist in all other countries, but in the US, it's a little bit different than it would be in the UK versus it would be in Mexico versus it would be in Brazil. Um, but it's nice to learn about all those different aspects. How did colonization affect that identity? That's just like the start research aspect. I always suggest investing in that community. That means getting to know people in that community, uh, being an accomplice, which is slightly different than an ally. An accomplice is like there to offer any aid that that community might need in raising awareness for themselves and doing things for themselves because they have the capability to do that. Um, but being an accomplice and ally and learning what does this community have, like what are things that they wouldn't share with other people? And they might not share it with you at the beginning, but like you're not going in there just to write about them. You're going in there to really invest and get to know them and understand their aspects and their perspectives. Um, and then, unfortunately, I can't go into all of the advice of avoiding misrepresentation because I wrote a whole book about it. But there's so many different like methods and exercises. So if you have like a specific question, I'm happy to, go into specific ways. Is it wise or even necessary to always apply the Bechtel test? So the Bechtel test is something that is usually applied toward film, and it's like I believe it's like women, how many women are in the film and speak to each other. Is that right? Am I thinking that's the right thing? I think it is aspect of like speaking to each other. Let me see.
I've never heard of it. What is
Yeah,
this?
okay. So I looked it up. A simple 3-point criteria for evaluating women representation in a work of fiction. It must have at least two women in it who talk to each other, and they must discuss something besides a man. So this is something created, yeah, by film, and people in fiction, writers have kind of talked about it too, because of course we're all writers, screenwriters to us. And I think film started doing it because they noticed there weren't a lot of women characters speaking to each other, or there would just be one woman character in a whole film. And she was only in like, or there would be two women characters or three, but they only talked about men. They didn't talk about anything else.
Mm.
And people started noticing like this is problematic. And so to bring up women's representation in film, they started applying the Bechdel test. Um, yeah, applying it to literary fiction, um, I, I would also say I just kind of want us to kind of throw away the Bechdel test. I don't think you need to push yourself to write anything that doesn't feel necessarily the thing that you want to write. Because if I start telling people, hey, you should have at least one person of color in your story, you should have one disabled character in your story, you should ensure that you have two women characters in your story, it's going to feel forced and it's probably going to bring up some stereotypes. It's probably going to have some poor misrepresentation. And then, like, and readers will notice, because I've actually, I did an event recently and somebody brought this up in kind of the class that I taught was like they were like I hate when I see people forcing diversity in their work just because they think that they need to do that to diversify, and it's tokenistic, it's obvious, it doesn't work, the characters come out flat. So yeah, I don't think we need to apply any aspect of like every book should have diversity in any aspect. If that's what you feel called to do, then we can go from there on how to best represent and to not misrepresent those identities. But otherwise, I don't. If you do not feel ready to write a woman character, or you do not feel ready to write a queer character, like just don't push yourself to do it. Um, Thank you, Andrew. This is so helpful. I'm writing a YA sci-fi novel with three point of view characters. Whoo, good for you. One more prominent than the other two, and one of the less prominent main characters is homosexual. And I want that to be how he identifies and has father issues around it, excuse me, but not be a romantic arc like it seems like they always are in YA books with gay boys. Gotcha. Excuse me. Can I leave it in just in the background and not really a plot line other than his dad's acceptance? Oh, we got somebody else. Um, okay. Other than his dad's acceptance, he is also of Southeast Asian descent. Also, how is your video course more valuable than your book? Okay, good questions. Okay, so you have three main characters. One character is gay, a boy, Southeast Asian, and he has some father issues. I'm assuming around how his sexual orientation, like the connection between him and his dad and his sexual orientation.
Yeah,
Um, is that right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, Cool, but you're not looking to have a romantic arc in it, which I think is fine. My first book was YA, and I got a lot of feedback from people going, "Think I'm so glad your character did not have romance at all. That wasn't even part of their story because I know a lot of YA books have romance stories, but they don't have to. So cool. Can I just leave his homosexuality in the background and not really a plot line other than his dad's acceptance?" Absolutely. I think when it comes to any aspects of a marginalized identity, it doesn't have to be like this central aspect of your character. So my brother's gay, and I remember when he came out, my dad was talking to me about my brother's being gay. I mean, he identifies as queer now. But at the time when he was identified as gay, my dad goes, um, I just want him to remember that being gay is not his only identity. Like it's one part of his identity. And I've had friends, who gay friends, queer friends who have said the exact same thing. Like that's just one aspect of my identity. I have like all these other things, and it doesn't completely like take over every aspect. And I say that throughout my book is that remember your character is intersectional identities. They're gonna have a race, ethnicity, a sexual orientation, a gender identity, disability or not, a nationality. They're gonna have a body type, a class, a location, an education. All of these identities, and we don't need to focus on one identity only because that's when we're going to start getting into stereotype issues because somebody who is gay Southeast Asian and a boy is going to have a totally different experience than my brother who is queer, mixed, Mexican and white and a boy, right? Like and they're going to have totally different queer experiences from each other because of all those other identities impact them in different ways. So, if you do not want to make it a plot point, I actually don't think you need to make it a plot point. I don't think that a character's marginalized identity has to be part of a plot point. There has to be a discrimination aspect. There has to be some like trauma aspect based on their identity. In fact, I think it usually is um, more exciting to a reader when it's not, because for so long, a lot of characters with historically marginalized identities, like their entire identity, their entire purpose in the book is to have some like discrimination aspect pop up and be a big problem for them. Even recently, I had a friend who or she's about to publish a book, and her character has one arm, has one hand, just like she was born with one hand. And I was reading like the sections in the book where where the character talks about having one hand, and it's literally like two sections of the whole book. And this is the main character. Like and the author was telling me, I don't like her having one hand is not the story. It's the stories about her falling in love and like learning something about herself in this process. And so yeah, I mentioned her having one hand, but I don't need to talk about it really much more than that. And I thought that was really cool and exciting. So I hope that's helpful. And as per your second question, how is your video course more valuable than your book? So the book is written for a general audience of writers, like every type of writer from every genre, right? The book only has one section on genres, in terms of historical fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, memoir, horror, mystery, thriller. Like it's one chapter. Everything in the book can be applied to every genre and every writer. But after the book came out, I kept getting a lot of feedback from speculative fiction writers, so sci-fi writers, fantasy, romantasy, dystopian, and am I missing somebody? Speculative fiction. Um, those people are coming to me and going, "Hey, I'm world building, and in my world, like I don't have Mexican people. I don't have um American citizens. I like the identities are different because I'm building a whole other world, either in the future or that's magical or fantastical. How do I apply these things to that world? Because there are humans in that world and they do have different skin tones. And I am trying to like convey that they have different hair types or different body types or They have disabilities. How do I talk about disabilities in a futuristic world with different technology or in a fantasy world? Is it ableist if all the disabilities are cured? So I was getting all these questions, and I realized like people who are creating fantastical, speculative worlds, they need a lot more insight than the book was able to give at this time. Hopefully, in the future, I can update it and add like bigger sections for each genre. But with the video course, if you do sci-fi, fantasy, romantasy, speculative fiction, etc., I suggest going to that because I talk specifically about um, how to talk about disabilities, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and nationalities in those types of in those genres. Because it is going to be different than it would be for literary fiction or commercial fiction. And then I also have, and I'm going to end up showing you at the end of today's Ask Me Anything session. I'm going to show you what the course looks like so that you can see how it's kind of set up. And um, I will also mention the course has exercises that are not in the book. I didn't want to include, there's a few exercises that are also in the book, but most of the exercises are not in the book. All of the examples, like literary excerpts and examples, are speculative fiction. They're not in the book. There's writing challenges, also not in the book. And there's resources that are specifically for speculative fiction writers in this topic of writing identity, not your own, that is not in the book. There are some aspects of the book in the course, but I would say like 80% of the course is not in the book at all. So hopefully that's a little helpful. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks.
you're welcome. And I will show you before we end today a course. Like I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see what it looks like, and then you can see like what one of the lessons will look like. Okay. In the same vein as Can a White Man Sing the Blues, I asked, can a gringo write magical realism? In my case, the oppressed group is the mentally ill and homeless. Okay. So, um, magical realism was created by the Latin American uh, diaspora of writers because they happen to live and be created through this colonization that happened in Latin America, right? And so they were using magical realism to critique the powerful people, the privileged people, the dictatorships, the autocratic governments that were popping up in Latin America. And it got really big with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and magical realism exploded across the world. So everybody writes magical realism now. I absolutely think it's okay for anybody to write magical realism. It's a genre. Like we wouldn't say just because I mean, I don't know exactly who created historical fiction, but let's pretend like historical fiction was created by only one race. Like everybody writes can write historical fiction, right? It's the kind of same way with magical realism. And the beautiful thing about that genre is it is this great tool to talk about privilege, to critique systems that are in place that are oppressing marginalized communities and people with mental health conditions and the houseless. I absolutely think magical realism can be used in ways to talk about those systems that continue to not support, to not help, to not take care of them. Um, but yeah, make sure when you are still writing about those groups of people that you know their terms that are more widely used today. Understand the systems, understand the systematic oppression, understand the laws that affect them. In the location that you're writing about within the book, or and also like within the nation or the country or their state. Um, and so all of those aspects can come in, and you can create this really phenomenal story. But I think magical realism, I'm all for all of us using it to critique power dynamics happening in this world today? Good question. Do we have any others?
I have another question, Alex.
Great.
So when I've talked about exploring this question and working on characters who are not like myself. And some of this is about writing white characters. Um, I've been asked about the fact that, well, it's different because I'm a minority, right? And that somehow the exploration wouldn't be the same. I think it is because, we have biases too and such.
Mhm.
But but that's my question. I mean, is it the same, or do we have to have the same, do we have the same challenges when writing across race and gender and such?
Yeah, oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. Because I do in a lot of my presentations when I do presentations in classes, one of the first things, like probably like on the third slide, I say, just because you have a historically marginalized identity does not mean you have some innate ability to understand how somebody of a different marginalized identity experiences the world. In fact, your identity, your community, and groups that you are a part of might have specific stereotypes about a different identity, like a different community or identity that somebody from a different one would not have of that identity. But because within your group and the dynamics of that group and the history and the culture and the laws or whatever it might be, you might have stereotypes and biases about that community that you're not even aware that you have or that could come up in your work. Um, and probably the best example of this is disabilities. Most people think that race and ethnicity, they assume that we get race and ethnicity wrong more often than not in our creative writing works. And I do think we get it wrong a lot. Like I think we have a lot of work to do as writers and publishing as a whole. However, probably the worst identity that we write is disabilities because a lot of us are not exposed to people with disabilities, different types of disabilities, or know about the laws related to people with disabilities or the challenges and accessibility that they have in the world. And also, a lot of our language, even like our sayings, highlight like ableist things, and we say them all the time. The blind leading the blind. Are you deaf or something? Like those are ableist statements, and we could easily use them for our characters and have no disabled characters in the story, and we're not even aware we're doing that. Um, a lot of times, like so a lot I see that a lot with disabilities and people thinking, well, because I have a marginalized identity, of course I'll be able to write somebody with disabilities well. And I always share this story. So my sister is she has physical and intellectual disabilities. They are so severe that she cannot walk, she cannot talk or communicate with like pointing or sign language or words. Um, the only way I can understand her is by me reading her body language, which is very, very, very subtle. Um, and so I was raised alongside with her. She's older than me all my life. I've been very close and activist about the disability community. I know a lot about physical and intellectual communities and the laws related to that. However, when I was starting to get into creative writing, I wanted to write about the disabled community because it's part of my family. Like my sister is my number one person in the world. And I look back on stuff that I've written. I've looked at stuff that I am currently writing, and my mind is blown how much bias still creeps in there. And the little saviorism things that I've written, the trauma porn that I've written about disabled communities that I was not aware I was doing. And you look back on it and go, how could I do this when this is like the person I love so much. I'm so connected to it. I know more than the average person who is not disabled, and yet I can still get it wrong. I can do all this research. I can know all these things and still get it entirely wrong. So I say that just to say, like, we are all kind of starting at the same place. We all need to think about we're starting at the same place. Now, do people with historically marginalized identities, maybe they have some personal experience with understanding privilege and experiencing it and understanding how discrimination feels? Absolutely. 100%. but I don't want people to come into the process of writing thinking, well, I got this down. Like, I don't have to do the research. I don't have to do as much. I understand what it feels like. You can draw on some of those things, but there are aspects of oppression and systematic discrimination that you are not even going to be able to see or understand or recognize unless you're from somebody that of that community. So you have to really, integrate and learn about that community so much so that you start seeing the things that they see 10 times faster than you.
Mhm.
But I hope that answers the question. Yeah, that was fantastic. Great, great question. I'm glad you asked that. Okay, we probably have time for one more question before I give a little sneak peek at the course. Maybe two. We'll see. All right.
Okay, I'm going to ask another question
Do
then.
it, do it, do
So,
it.
okay, so um, we were talking about dialect and accent before, and when I think of a character, I am trying to think of how they sound,
Mhm.
but not in terms of dialect or accent, but just, what do they sound like? Where are they coming from? And when I was discussing this with one of my supervisors, he said, um, "You mean like a ventriloquist?" And I said, "No,
Mhm.
more like an actor. How an actor seeks to embody a character, to truly step in their shoes,
Yeah.
right? And walk around just like what you were just saying. How do they see the world,
Mhm.
right? So the question is, how does a writer move from one to the other? Because I do think that certain writers begin trying to imitate, right?
Yeah.
It's imitation and it is that ventriloquism. So how do you recognize that and how do you move from one to the other?
That's such a good question. Um, I mean, part of it is like all of the research that you can do on the back end, right? Like the nonfiction research, all understanding all of these things that are going through a character's mind. And I'm glad I think you mentioned voice, like we're talking about voice here. And in
Yeah.
the book, I say your character's voice is not dependent on one identity because they have so many identities. And so even when we're talking about their dialogue, their voice, the words they use, the dialect they use, the tone, how their sentences are structured are going to be impacted by, I mean, at the least five identities, but so many more, right?
Mhm.
Um, I have an exercise in the book where I encourage writers to get into the bodies of their characters. And I'm doing this because this is kind of what I do for my characters. I start I feel like the body is a little bit easier to get to before you get to the voice. Feeling how does my character move? How big or small or thin or large is their body? Are certain parts of their bodies getting in the way of other things? Do they run into walls? Is their shoulders always hunched because they're shy? Is it pulled back? Do they look at people directly in the eye? Do they not? What do they wear? How does their legs move? How do they sit? How do they stand? But most importantly, and I would say this the same would be with voice, how how do I as the character perceive my body and the way I sound, but also how do people perceive how I sound and how I move? Because as the writer, you're going to be thinking in terms of setting in other characters at all times, or I hope you are, and also how that character is thinking about themselves. So not only do we need to talk about how the character's moving through the world, their world, but how are other people reacting to them based on what they're doing, how they're moving, how they're sounding, um, the different words they use or don't use, all of those things are going to be impactful. So usually we only think about how the character perceives himself. We forget how other people perceive that. And I think that can be helpful in maybe moving from ventriloquism to really being into the character and their different identities.
Mhm.
Because in fact, I'm actually the older I get, the more I am observing how other people see me
Mhm.
versus me moving through the world and being like at the center of my world. I find it fascinating, like studying people, watching people. I'll even like notice something and I'll say something to the person, be like, "Why are you doing that with your hands?" Because I'm very curious about why they're doing something, or why'd you say that word? Like, why'd you say it in that way? Where does that come from? I need to understand why you said it that way, and that might come up into into their voice, into the way they move or the way they think as my characters. So really, yeah, I think thinking about it as actors is a fantastic way of approaching inhabiting your character. It also is going to help you think about how they move throughout a scene so
Mhm.
that your reader can visualize how they're moving in the scene and interacting with other people as well. I don't know if I answered that as like fully as I
No, that
could.
was good.
Okay,
Thank
great. Thank you.
you.
Uh, and then we have another question here. Is this a fair summary of your presentation? We need to seek truth and use our empathetic imaginations. I really like that.
Yeah.
Seeking truth. Yeah. And understanding there are multiple different types of truths, two different types of people from different backgrounds and identities. And yeah, empathy, sympathy, um, and imagination mixed with research. Yeah. That's fantastic. Okay, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to share my screen real quick so you can see what the course looks like from the uh this is all right. Okay, so say you bought the course, you log in, this is the front page. And this is just describing what the course would look like. It's broken down into an introduction section, a lesson one section, lesson two, lesson three, lesson four, and more guidance. So introduction, we talk about identity and biases, bias blocks, how this impacts your creative writing. You kind of get into thinking about unconscious bias and how it can show up in your speculative world. Lesson one, before you write, all the things we can do even before we start writing. It discusses stereotypes and harmful tropes because we know that in genre, like people love tropes. Like writers love to use tropes. I'm all for you using tropes. There's nothing inherently wrong about tropes. However, there are harmful tropes, which perpetuate stereotypes and problematic descriptions and ideas about different communities. Lesson two would focus on specific identities. So I break down race, ethnicity, sexual and romantic orientation, gender identity, disabilities, and nationalities within speculative fiction worlds. So how do you talk about skin tone? How do you talk about queer or straight um, sexual orientations within your world? How do you discuss gender identities within the world? What would be realistic, not realistic? Disabilities. If you have no disabilities in your story, why don't you have disabilities? Maybe you don't want them. That's fair, but also I need to understand it's not an ableist reason, that it's realistic. I would question why does somebody not fall through the cracks of the system of that world? And then nationalities, talking about different nations, um, either our own or new ones that you make up. Because sometimes we know that like sci-fi and dystopian uses a lot of the same identities that we have in our reality, but it might be like 10 years in the future or 30 or 400, etc. And then lesson three, other identity elements. So this one would talk about trauma and inspiration porn, how to approach dialogue, writing discrimination, and harmful tropes in speculative fiction. And then editing is the last section. Um, there are actually three different ways you can get this course. If you get the platinum course, you get all the videos, all the writing challenges, all the resources, all the exercises. If you get the gold one, you get all the videos and all the resources. And then the bronze one is just the videos. The editing section actually for the platinum course comes with an editing checklist that is downloadable. So I'm going to show you what one of the lessons looks like. So you would have the video at the top. You play it, stop it whenever you want. You can come back and watch it as many times as you'd like. And then it describes what's going to be in the lesson. I have a quote from the book. If there's exercises within the videos, I have them listed here, and you can break this down and it describes all of the exercises. So you can come back and do the exercises as many times as you like. Somebody who took the course was like, we love the exercises in the video, but I didn't want to do the exercises while I was watching the video. I wanted to do them later. So I made sure to put them in here. Then there's a writing challenge that's not in the video that I include. And then there's resources. There's podcasts, videos, books, articles on the side that discusses different aspects of this topic in terms of sci-fi, speculative fiction, etc. So that is what that looks like. And then the more guidance is kind of like, do you have a testimonial, like feedback you want to provide or suggestions? Are you interested in looking at a critique or consultation, etc.? And just down here is kind of describing more about the book and what you would learn in the class. So just extra stuff. But I'm going to stop sharing. Um, Again, if you're interested, the course is there on the in the chat. I just included the link to it. But I just want to say thank you so much for all of these questions. Um, I'm really appreciative that y'all showed up and you asked really good questions. And I hope people who are watching this after the facts get something from this. And maybe I'll keep doing these AMA sessions on a regular basis. We'll see. I'm looking at ways to like offer more resources that are free, either through my blog or my newsletter. For instance, I just reached out to an editor at a publishing house who actually edited Writing an Identity Not Your Own, but now she's an editor at Tor, which publishes speculative fiction, fantasy, sci-fi. And I want to ask her about like, what do editors think about this writing process? How does it affect what they acquire in terms of books? Does it affect how they work with writers? Like, how do they work with writers to get unconscious bias out of their books and stuff? So hopefully I can do some like interviews with people in the industry so you can get feedback from literary agents and editors and other writers on why this is an important process or their perspective on it as well. So yeah, I'm ramping up, offering more opportunities and insight because I want to get this out in the world. So if you have a friend, share it with them. It's available in ebook, print, and audiobook, which I did record. But thank you again. Thanks, Christopher, for buying the book and the course. No problem. I'm glad that you came and asked questions and people were interested or listened, and this is amazing. So thank you again, and reach out to me if you have questions, and I hope to see you on other platforms or in the future.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you so much. If you, your name is pronounced Sophronia?
Yes.
Sophronia? Okay. If you wanted to talk further, please reach out to me by email or my contact form and we can
Okay.
talk. Because I know you had other questions related to your dissertation, and I'm happy to answer that and get into it. All
Okay.
right.
Thank you. But we did the main one
Oh, good, good.
tonight. So thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right,
Okay.
see y'all.